physician scientist at U of L. So he wears a lot of hats. So he is the Associate Chief of Staff for Research and Development at the Whitney Medical Center. He's also the medical director for the CTU, U of L Clinical Trials Unit, and he's a professor of medicine and bioengineering at U of L. Dr. Dryden, thank you so much. We will hold all the questions until the end. So we're going to let Dr. Dryden run through his slideshow, and then at the end, we'll take questions. Thank you, Dr. Dryden.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Wong, and great to be with you all out there in the broader research community. So I did entitle the presentation Academic and Community Partners Wanted, because we certainly would like to be able to expand VA research outside of the small pool of people that are actually conducting research here at Robley Rex VA. So let's see. All right. So the agenda is going to be who can conduct research at the Robley Rex VA MC. And we'll talk a little bit about the non-clinician eligibility waiver. We'll talk a little bit about some recent funding results, the research priorities, because that is number one to keep in mind when you're actually thinking about submitting a project here, because we're not as broad as, say, the NIH or certain other NSF, things like that. We do have our specific research priorities. Every research application in the VA now begins with a pre-application. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about the budgeting process just a little bit, and then we can go over some frequently asked questions and helpful hints. So eligible researchers for conducting VA research are basically MD clinicians with a VA appointment. Those are the easy button. Those people can just submit a grant and not have to go through any hoops to be able to try to get access to those funding lines. PhD researchers, if they have any VA salary, are also eligible without jumping through any hoops. So there are a few people that we have been funding pretty continuously for the past, 10 or 15 years that have VA8s. And so they're always able to put in for an application. But if there are clinical researchers that are out right now that have clinical grants or with a research science component, that would be a great opportunity for people to be able to be hired into the VA with eighths to be able to conduct that research as a co-investigator or just a kind of a research scientist associated with that grant, to be able to get those VA8s to be able to enhance eligibility for when they want to go in for their own independent grant. If you are a PhD researcher without a VA salary, then we can actually file an eligibility waiver, but I don't want to discourage anybody, but this is a process that I think is still going through refinement at the VA, and so I was a little disappointed with the results that we had this go around, but I say we continue to push the envelope and to try to get people from the outside into the VA research enterprise. And then the only other opportunity to be able to bring personnel in is if we have lab personnel, research technicians, biostatisticians, a variety of support personnel. We can actually bring them into the process hired under an IPA process. So this is a contracting process that the VA has to be able to bring in people from the university is really the mechanism for that. The only requirement is that they have to have been hired for 3 months at the university before they can be hired to the VA through the IPA process. So that can potentially be a little bit of a stumbling block. You have to realize that in your funding stream, you've got to have that 3 months worth of salary to be able to support that person on the grant until you can actually bring them in if they're not already hired into the system. Now, on the topic of non-clinician eligibility or those waivers, this really came about because there were an increase in the number of non-VA applicants, and the emphasis on recruitment and retention of clinical investigators was kind of shifting from one side the PhD to MD. And so the Leadership Council in the VA Office of Research and Development approved a policy that non-clinician investigators applying for VA merits must have at least 1/8 of VA effort. Now that's basically 5 hours a week. That equates to one VA8. So 8 times 5 is 40. That's where you come up with the standard VA work week. And so there are ways to be able to kind of combine time between the university and the VA creatively so that, you can have an appointment at the VA as well as the university, but that's really a talk for another time. So the policy that was utilized to come to this decision really was based on the commitment to the VA requirement for the program guide 1200.15, which also requires VA employment requirement for research funding. And so this really kind of de-incentivizes the flipping of a proposal. So you're writing an NIH proposal, it doesn't get funded, or an NSF proposal doesn't get funded, and you immediately then flip it around to the VA. This is really to kind of set up a stage where you are focusing on VA priorities with, VA resources and things like that in mind, so that we're really trying to bring the best fit for research into the process. And so before this, we had gone through some other hoops where we submitted a package and those people were evaluated and they were given 3 years of eligibility to be able to submit grants during that period of time. But that has all ended at this point in time. And now we're at this point where we have the VA merit submissions requiring 1/8 VA effort. However, we can get around that. So this process allows us to be able to submit a waiver request along with the pre-application RFA. Again, I was a little disappointed with the success or lack of success that we had with that process, but I think that this tells me that we need to have a lot more intensive interaction with the scientific reviewers, the program managers, scientific program managers, before we embark on this. So the bottom line is, if you're thinking about VA funding, let's go ahead and get started early on. And I'll show you some dates. We need to probably start at least a couple of months in advance to be able to help guide through these processes. So frequently asked question, what are the new eligibility requirements for PDs and PIs under the Merit Review Award Program? The bottom line is, if you are a non-clinical investigator, then you need to have at least 1/8 VA, or we submitted a waiver. Or for the Merit Award Program for PD, PI role for clinician investigators, they have to have at least a 5/8 VA appointment at the time the award is funded. So the bottom line there is that you can have somebody who doesn't have as many 8s and is a clinician at the university, but in order to be able to be funded, we have to get a commitment from the medical center director that we can increase that funding from whatever it is, however many number of 8s to 5/8. And so point in case is Dr. Matt Cave, who recently was awarded a MERP for evaluating military exposure related problems in veterans. And he, I think, was at 2/8 at that point in time. And we had an increase in his 8s to a total of 5/8. So it's certainly something that can be done. And then the PIs must conduct the research at the VAs or VA-approved sites and be registered with a complete investigative profile and ePromise. So the ePromise profile is something that we can set up through our AO, Administrative Officer. It's actually pretty quick. Usually can be done within a couple of days. And then we have currently VA-approved sites at the University of Louisville where that research can be conducted. And so we can work within those confines to be able to get the job done, depending on what research you want to do. So other things, what does this 1/8 appointment requirement for non-clinicians replace the eligibility request submissions that we had before? Yes. And does the 1/8 appointment requirement for non-clinicians apply to career development applicants? And the answer to that is no. So that's a different program that we'll talk about in just a few minutes that doesn't require that 1/8 appointment to be able to submit that career development award. So if we look at the funding cycle here, it's very similar to, say, the NIH. And if we look at the ISRM scientific review groups and review cycles, you select the NOSI, which is the Notice of Specific Interest that's put out by the VA. There are then several RFAs that fit under the NOSIs, and we'll talk about those in a minute. You select the portfolio then, and then you select the scientific review group that would be evaluating that. And there are some descriptions in some of the paperwork that we have. You submit a pre-authorization, check your due dates. Always try to be in advance of that. We have a little bit more flexibility than the university as far as working down to the deadline for submission, but I will tell you that it's better to have at least a few days before that deadline to be able to check for errors, correct errors, and then resubmit. So you have to submit a pre-application for almost everything. If you get approved for that pre-application, then you submit a full application really a couple of months later. So you probably should have most of your full application all ready to go. And if your funding doesn't go the way you want, prepare to resubmit for the next cycle. And you are actually allowed to submit for a total of 3 times. So 1 time and then 2 after your initial rejection. And here, I'll throw these slides into the box afterward, but this will actually take you to the SRG purviews and review cycles, PDF, so you can have those things available. And this is really the array of actively managed portfolios is one of the sets of topics that is of particular interest to the VA. And then we have these other broad portfolios, which are broad purviews and capacity building. So we'll talk a little bit about these, but if you look at the topics here, health system research, medical health research, brain, behavioral, and mental health research, these are all very broad topics. But some of these others like TBI, Gulf War military exposures, pain, opioid use disorders, these are very high interest of the VA, but they're a very specific focus of research. So if we look at the broad portfolios, we've already kind of named those: brain, behavioral, mental health, health systems research, medical health, and rehab research, development, and translation. So that is a significant focus, and this is probably the most underutilized aspect of VA research in the entire portfolio. So if you have some good ideas here, this is a place to go because the pay lines are definitely much higher. Some of these actively managed portfolios, looking at very specific topics: Gulf War illness, military exposures. Again, we've had several successes here over the past couple of years with U of L researchers. Studies on pain and opioid use and long-term outcomes of VA opioid safety initiative. Pharmacogenomics of response to opioid medication. So the VA is very concerned about opioid use in the veteran population, and there are many opportunities to be able to evaluate new medications, new approach to opioid reductions, things like that. Precision oncology, we actually have a precision oncology kind of node grant here at the VA, which is very nice, and that's allowed us to really expand our screening opportunities, be able to bring on both industry funded as well as VA specific oncology projects, and then studies on suicide prevention. So anybody over there in the Kent School or anybody in the behavioral sciences, if you have good ideas about suicide prevention, the VA is the place to look at that, because there is a huge focus on preventing suicide in the veteran population. And then, of course, traumatic brain injury is something that is an ongoing focus because of really the past couple of major wars, conflicts that we've had that have generated a lot of patients with traumatic brain injury. Some other funding opportunities, again, the NOCIs, which include chronic effects of neurotrauma, durability of rehabilitation and interventions for veterans. So again, rehab kind of questions, studies on Gulf War illnesses, and then women's health and healthcare. So there is a focus, even though the VA is not a huge purveyor of healthcare to women, there is a probably about a 25% of the VA population that is female and needs to have, their specific healthcare needs addressed. And then we have this huge medical genomics project, which if you have been following the Million Veteran Program, which is now enrolled over 1 million veterans, each one of those people that has been enrolled has had their blood genotyped and, a vast array of SNPs and things like that characterize each one of those veterans. And you can associate that with long-term access to healthcare that have been utilized by most of the veterans in that program to be able to come in really with a wealth of opportunities for study. And a few other things, the VA Cures, which was looking at coronavirus research. There are a variety of research projects that are funded by CSR&D. We have the Merit Review Program, which is kind of the most ubiquitous investigator-initiated research program. We do have career development programs, which I'll talk about in just a minute. We also have the laboratory animal major equipment, which is probably not eligible. We're not eligible for because we don't have an animal program anymore. And then we have the program and shared equipment evaluation program, or the SHEEP program, where that's an opportunity to be able to buy very high dollar research equipment that could potentially be used or that would be used for VA research or research with VA population. And then the Barnwell Award and the PCASE Award, these are awards for very promising either junior investigators or senior investigators. And I think Dr. McLean was actually a recipient of the Barnwell Award, if I remember correctly. Other funding opportunities, we've kind of gone over these. Query, or the Quality Enhancement Research Initiative, is something that is spread across, I think, 200 research scientists that are across the VA. The CSB Cooperative Studies Program is something that we're trying to become more involved with at the Robley Rex VA. We have now nationwide studies that are looking at using MRI to screen for liver lesions in patients with cirrhosis compared to ultrasound. We're looking at the DINE program, which is, or I'm sorry, the Gourmet program, which is actually looking at prepared meals for patients with chronic heart failure and the outcomes there. And MVP, we've enrolled over 11,000 veterans into the Million Veteran Program, and there are some great opportunities to be able to, again, go in and have this huge wealth of information that is tied to a genomic database. And then Veterans Health Research, Systems Research, they're actually about, I want to say 600 health researchers that are spread across the VA that have various grants. And I have many opportunities to review those sitting on the central IRB, and there's some very interesting topics that people are able to go in and evaluate in small groups of clinicians or clinicians and patients, how particular interventions with practice can change outcomes. And so that's an interesting kind of arm of the VA that's, I think, different than anywhere else in the United States. The funding opportunities go by these numbers. So the I-50 is the core award for core programs. For the I-01 is the traditional merit review award, which has a budget of about $300,000, anywhere from 2 to 4 years. The I-02 is the pre-application for a merit review. The I-21 is a pilot project award, which is $115,000 per year for up to 2 years. And the IK1 is the Career Development Award 1, which is up to 100% of salary covered for an individual. I think it's for up to 5 years. And then the IK2 is a Career Development Award 2, which is for people that are not within 2 years of their terminal degree, but have not yet had a major award like an NIH, an NIH major award. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the word I want to use. Okay, let's turn our attention to the scientific review groups here. So the scientific review groups at the VA review over 2,000 applications per year. They have 4 review cycles. So there's the winter program, the spring program, the summer program, and fall. So spring and fall are where most of the medical surgical things fall. Winter and summer are where most of the rehab programs fall for submission. And most of these IRGs, and there are a total of 55, will convene twice a year. And the members have broad scientific expertise. There are people that have served on these boards here at the University of Louisville, as well as, area universities or institutions. And these really span the, broad spectrum of veteran healthcare needs. So the SRGs are subcommittees to ORD's parent committees, which are biomed and clinical, health services, and rehab. And these are the people that really set the agenda for how we're going to be spending our research dollars. And so here's just a snapshot of a recent funding cycle where there were 288 applications for this particular cycle. There were 243 IO1s, which are the merits. There were 16 I-21s and 27 IK2s and 2 IU1s. So the degrees were mostly MDs or DOs. There were, however, 104 PhD grants and then 72 MD PhD. So if you look at the the balance, the majority of these are some sort of clinician, about almost a little over half are PhD non-clinician investigators. If we look at the subject, about 160 of them included animals, and about 117 of them were only humans. There were 18 clinical trials, and these spanned 18 scientific review groups. So at any one point in time, it's hard to say exactly who's going to be coming in. But if we look at the funding ratio, this was actually a little down for the cycle. So these numbers are traditionally a little bit higher in the VA. But for the IO1s, the success rate was at least still double digits, 15.6. The I-21s was close to 20% here. The IK2s were almost 30%, and the IU1s were 100%. So if you've got the right grant, then you have a very good chance of getting funded. If we look at the characteristics of these applications, what they were studying, there were 5 AI evaluations, 3 big data, 38 chronic conditions, 4 MERPs, 1 TBI, and 1 precision oncology. So again, chronic conditions kind of win the day because that's what the VA is most likely to be dealing with. And if we look at the research priorities, to bring that into focus, there's a lot of stuff on here. I realize that. And so these are the research priorities that bring into focus the ORD, or Office of Research and Development, VA, and congressional priorities from bench to veteran. So a lot of funding is actually dictated by law. So we have, a variety of laws up here that fund particular research portfolios. We have the Hannon Act, which is TBI suicide prevention. We have the PACT Act, which includes Gulf War and the Military Exposures Program. We have the CARA Act for pain and opioid use disorders. Cleveland-Dole Act for precision oncology. The Mission Act for community care and rural health. And that is a focus of the VA that generally is something that is can be a really interesting focus because we have many VISNs that are in very rural areas, including Appalachia. So those are topics of interest for the VA. And then we have the Elizabeth Dole Act here for caregiving and value-based care models. If we look again at other aspects of VA focus here, looking at timely access, looking at well-being through mental health, physical health, and spiritual approaches. And we're actually even now getting into the point where we're looking at psilocybin research, looking at a variety of mechanisms to be able to help improve mental illness and prevent suicide for the veteran population. So like I said earlier, every application starts with a pre-application, then followed by a full submission if you get accepted. And so the pre-application is really a short form description of a project similar to a letter of intent, and it contains the solicitation information. So the NOSI, the RFA, the portfolio that the PI intends to submit to. It'll talk about whether you're a clinician or non-clinician, what your current VA appointment is, and any kind of resources that you might need to conduct the study. So it's a very simple budget. It talks about the study population, whether you want to have access to the Million Veteran Program, and then what the goals of the project are. So hypothesis, specific aims, and gaps addressed. It requires a biosketch for the PI. And then it also requires a waiver request. So this is typically a one-page letter that I can put together to submit, talking about eligibility. If we need to exceed the budget cap, that's something that we can potentially get permission for. Or if there's going to be offsite research, that's something that we can ask for in advance. Then the reviews are conducted by the ISRM administrative, scientific, and contract staff to look for compatibility with the requirements. And then the portfolio directors will make that final decision on approving those pre-applications and then notify people that were successful that they can proceed with the full submission. So again, I'm not going to go over the SRGs except for the fact that we have a pretty large number. So there are 55 standing SRGs, and I actually tried to bring put a table in, but it just doesn't really work very well for a slide because there's a lot of information that goes in, such as what their purview is, who the administrator is, and contact information. So I do have that document that I'll put into the chat box, and so that's something that you can follow up with. And then after the submission of the peer review, there's a summary statement, just like the NIH, that contains the critiques of each assigned reviewer. And then you get a final score based on 100 to 500. And then most merit review applications will also receive a percentile score. So that percentile ranking can be used to normalize the scores against the different SRGs so that you can kind of compare how you've been done. And then also they can make their funding decisions. But all of the summary statement scores and percentiles are vetted through the ISRM post-review process, just like the NIH. And so it takes a little bit of time for you to be able to get the full package of information about how your grant fared, just like the NIH. These are some important steps here. Again, you can go to this website, www.research.va.gov, funding, RFAs. Unfortunately, you have to be on a VA network to be able to access this. So if you have a question, you want to reach out to me, I can get that information. Our AO, Willie, Neil can also help get that information. But unfortunately, or you can come here and we can sit down in the office and we can go over opportunities here. But after you get into the VA network, you identify the notice of special interest that the application is most responsive to, choose your appropriate RFA, your mechanism for funding, and then you would choose your study section or scientific review group. And you want to make sure that you do that appropriately because they will deep six that grant in a heartbeat if you don't pick the right SRG. And so that's why it's very important to talk to the people to begin with, to make sure that your idea kind of fits with their portfolio, to make sure that you're on the right track for submitting to their SRG, or make sure that they don't have a recommendation for another SRG for your particular topic of research. Check into your due dates. And these have been fluctuating a little bit over the past couple of years, and so have been a little bit of confusion, but I will show you the most recent set in stone dates, and hopefully they don't change too much. And those would apply to the RFA pre-application. And then again, contact your SRG at any point in time with any questions, because I can't answer specific questions for each one of those. I'm sorry for the clarity here. This is a cut and paste here, but if we look at the NOCs will be updated in September, December, March, or June for the corresponding submission cycle. The pre-application is going to be due October 10th, January 10th, April 10th, or July 10th, with these caveats down here, looking at summer 2026 and spring 2027, actually these being applicable to those new applications. We had a slightly later application in February for the spring cycle for this year. But after that, everything should be tracking along quite nicely. Then the applications get submitted, about a month later. Then the they can begin being submitted about a month later. And then a couple of months later, the submission deadline is hard and fast there. And these are the review cycles, the administrative cycle. And so you can kind of estimate when funds might be available. And it's typical cycle as what you would see for the NIH. So looking at budgeting and finance, I'm really not going to spend a lot of time on this. The numbers are published, and there's some flexibility if you need flexibility to be able to truly answer your budget. But this is the way that it works. So you have for a single site, you can add additional sites if you want a multi-site project. But you have budget period 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 5 if you need it. You have your PD salary, which if you are an MD clinician, that PD salary is actually covered by your regular salary, and that doesn't have to go into the overall, total budget here. But if you're a non-clinician PI, then you will definitely need to include salary here. And then fringe, if you have multiple PI, then obviously you would include additional, and then any other VA personnel. So hired or to be hired, and then if you have any other people such as consultants and biostatisticians, things like that, there is an opportunity to be able to buy some equipment if you need some small numbers. They usually say about 50,000, I think, is the total. And then IPAs. IPAs are that contracting mechanism that we are able to use to hire, say, your lab personnel from University of Louisville to be able to work on this grant. And so that way you can find funding to be able to keep those people that are integral to keeping your lab running, as well as to, get the work done. And that's kind of nice that you don't have to bring on entirely new people. So if you're starting up a new research project, you get funded, and let's say you need to hire a clinical coordinator, we might have somebody that we could kind of shuttle into your project, but you might have to hire, and hiring through the VA is not the easiest process. It can take actually several months for us to get through the ability to submit to the HR, to be able to get the recruitment letter out, to get the interview done, and then ultimately, to get your person hired in. Certainly a 3 to 4 month window is reasonable. But with the IPA, if you have somebody that's already employed at University of Louisville for at least 3 months, then they can easily be added to the research protocol, again, within probably a few weeks to a month period of time to be able to get the contracting process done. And then again, non-personal things such as equipment, travel, other direct items such as supplies, you total up your bottom line, and all of this stuff is actually done in the ASSIST program, which is very nice. You don't have to worry about standalone budgeting items or anything like that. So very similar to NIH as far as the process goes, but I think simpler. And then if you want to access VA research, again, this is the overall research entry page here. If you want to look at the particular research programs, you can get through to that through this link. And application submission guidance and templates. Now, this is where we start getting behind the firewall, and you would actually need to speak with me or somebody here at the research department to be able to get access to that if you don't have a VA computer or some sort of VA online access. And then if you want to look at the NOCs, the pre-application and full research application RFAs, that is also behind the funding, the firewall here at that link. And so I think we're getting pretty close to the end here. So I do want to mention the Clinical Research Foundation. That is really an integral component of our research activity. And this is the arm of federal research that allows the VA to be able to have a public-private cooperation. So if we didn't have this and we were trying to fund everything within the VA through VA funds only, it would be, a rather limited process. But because of the Clinical Research Foundation, it actually allows funds to flow from the outside of the VA to support research at the VA on veterans. And so that may be other federal programs, like we have some NIH grants that are where the research, part of the research is being conducted here on veterans. We have programs such as some NSF would be a possibility, foundation grants, even private dollars can come in through the Clinical Research Foundation to be able to fund veteran associated research. And so there are many opportunities to be able to work at the VA, and we have very wonderful research subjects here. So veterans tend to be very compliant. They have some very interesting focuses of research that need to be evaluated. And, it's just a very nice environment to work in. The work through the Clinical Research Foundation would be in conjunction with the director of the CRF, Dr. Michael Book, who is very accessible, who's very willing to do anything that we can to assist investigators to be able to bring their research to the VA so that we can conduct high quality research here. The caveat with working with the Clinical Research Foundation is it does require a CRADA. So this is kind of a clinical research and operational document that defines all of the interactions with the outside activity and the VA. But this is something that is kind of a cut and paste document. So the lawyers that are associated with this can take that kind of a template CRADA, put in the salient information, push it forward, and it's generally not a long process. So it's certainly probably easier to get a CRADA through the VA than it is to work with some of the contracting processes that I've had to deal with at U of L, where unfortunately we may take 9 to 10 to 12 months to be able to get through a contract process. And then we'd have to have some form of budget to be able to understand the money flow that would come into the system and then how we would pay for the work to be done here. So there's no free lunch, but the VA can be a very budget-friendly place to be able to conduct clinical research. And so a couple of other frequently asked questions. I would like to say that preclinical research is a priority for the ISRM at this point in time, but certainly clinical and translational research is probably more heavily supported at this point in time. You really need to be able to articulate the relevance of your research to the veteran health conditions or the veteran, mental health problems or social problems or, the health system. It doesn't work to again, flip some of those NIH documents or those NSF documents over to the VA if it's kind of a broad focus that may be outside of the VA sphere of relevance. And just remember, chronic disease is really one of the ISRM priorities. You saw that in one of the recent funding rounds, and many funded projects will be focusing on those chronic conditions. So if you have a chronic condition and you want to emphasize the importance of your study on veterans' health, then it's probably going to be a good match. You should definitely clearly address unmet clinical needs, especially in the veteran population, to justify how your project will translate into treatment for veterans and ensure relevance and impact on veteran health. And then engaging with veterans and providers helps to be able to better understand the clinical needs. So if you have projects that you're interested in bringing to the VA, then by all means, reach out to me. I'd be happy to connect you with clinicians that are in a particular area that could potentially be amenable to starting up a research collaboration. So probably the best way to get into VA research, if you're non-VA funded, non-clinical investigator, is to partner up. And we can definitely, make great things happen when that happens, when that's the case. And so translational research, I probably don't need to speak to the group about this, but basically this is taking basic science observations and moving them out into the healthcare setting, evaluating whether those observations can apply to human disease and potentially interventions. We need to demonstrate in the application where the research may impact care in the future, because the VA is really investing in how can we improve the future for veteran healthcare, reduce costs, improve outcomes, those kinds of things. And then if you are looking at maybe a basic science or a translational project, you definitely need to demonstrate how you can progress towards a clinical impact from those basic science activities. So some helpful hints about getting started. Talk to the ACOS R&D. If you're at University of Louisville, that's me. Put my email address in there. Please feel to reach out to me. If you are somehow affiliated with the VA or you want to find out more information after you talk to me, I can point you to the scientific program manager, the SPM. Again, early engagement with him will help ensure that you're aligning your proposal with funding opportunities, research, veteran priorities, the purview of the group, and that all increases the likelihood of success. If you are thinking about doing clinical trials, there are actually some unique opportunities within the VA to be able to pre-clinically vet your target, whatever your molecule is, go through all the IND enabling requirements that would bring you up to the point where you can have a conversation with the FDA, and then that 1 to 2 years worth of funding can be followed by 3 years worth of funding for a total of 5 years to be able to do the clinical trial that you may need to do to be able to demonstrate efficacy of your particular molecule. So talk to your SPM, and then also talk to the clinical trials team. And if you're unsure, submit prior to the application date. Avoid having to wait another round to submit. So only having 2 funding opportunities a year is a little bit wonky on the VA, but that's just the way that they work. And then, stay relevant to the VA funding priorities. Those are the most important aspects of this. And so now I'd be happy to take any questions.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Dryden. Those are excellent. And I did not know about VA funding at all before I talked to Dr. Dryden. And we actually was able to, submit a TERP. So we actually did a resubmission with Dr. Lukai. So it sounds like there are great opportunities out there. And I think a lot of us are probably not quite familiar. So thank you for this very resourceful presentation. So we'll open up for questions. Anybody got any questions? Okay, Dr. Tsai.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Dryden, and very nice talk and very detailed information.
Thank you.
I have two questions. And like Japan said, we never apply VA grant. I have collaborated with Jerry Yu from the pulmonary division, and he is a PI, and we work on like I got some salary from VA, and as a co-investigator. That is before COVID-19, about more than 5 or 6 years. But after the COVID-19, and we cannot stop. That means I also is a part of the VA employee, or I qualify for apply in the future?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last bit?
I mean, so is that means I also eligible to apply VA grant?
So unfortunately, you have to have an active payment stream of at least 1/8. So if you've been funded in the past, that doesn't necessarily help. But again, there are people that if there's any aspect that's translational about the research, then we could certainly hook you up with a clinician investigator out here, which would be a great opportunity. And there is that opportunity to be able to submit a waiver. So we can, for non-clinician investigators who are not currently funded by the VA, that's an opportunity. But, it's, I love to see the partnerships because I think that those are the ones that the VA really craves, to see that there are clinicians and non-clinicians working together to be able to conduct translational research. And again, another opportunity is, and this is something that I hope that we can see in the future, is that we can coordinate the activities between maybe clinician investigators who get funded by the VA and non-clinician investigators to be able to bring them in as a co-applicant to be able to start getting that stream of 1/8. It's maybe not a lot of money, it's not a lot of time, but it's eligibility. It's an aspect of eligibility.
Yeah. And following this question, and is related to, and when you talk about the priority, and chronic disease is very top. And I work on the diabetic complication, particularly for the heart failures. And currently, most studies, they work on the left ventricle and kind of the diastolic, systolic dysfunction. Not that many and people work on the right ventricle. And I collaborate with Japan, and we are really interested. Right ventricle, the role is very more complicated than left ventricle.
Yeah.
And do you think that will be a good topic and to think about the future collaboration?
I mean, number one, diabetic complications are huge in the VA population.
Correct.
I don't think anybody cares if it's the left or the right, as long as it's driving disease. I know that there is one, VA kind of VA-wide program. It's called a CSP that is looking at sildenafil for people with chronic right-sided heart failure who have respiratory disorders associated with it. So the VA doesn't discriminate between right or left ventricle. If you have good science to support it, then they will definitely take a look at it.
Yeah, I need to talk with John.
Yeah,
think about this.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that'll fit in. I'll kind of share, a little my experience on that. So if you are a physician working at the UofL, there's actually the contract between your department with the VA, like how many people they send down there. You do that. I mean, some people might not want to do clinical work at the VA, and if you don't want to do that, you go through the research route, although you're MD and DO. So you don't feel like, oh my God, I gotta at least have 1/8 assignment to the VA. That's not a facility necessary. So you can work with Dr. Dryden to get a 1/8 or get a waiver on there. What I see, this is important is really collaboration, right? Something like a lot of programs are really preclinical, and you need not only physician scientists, but you also need the basic science researcher. So I know with the CIEHS, we have a lot of people who do great basic science. So this is a great opportunity to work with a physician at the VA and apply for those wonderful grants.
Very good.
Do we have any other questions? Dr. Dryden, will you be willing to share the slides with everybody as a PDF? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I will, I'll drop those in. I'll prepare those and drop them in, along with one other document. So, yeah, thank you very much. I certainly hope to hear from you all. And, would love to try to really increase this, this VA U of L collaboration. There are so many opportunities for us to be able to do that. And, even outside in the community, I mean, healthcare systems research is something that's very unique to the VA. But again, having reviewed many grants, I'm like, why aren't we looking at this? Why can't we put some grants in for this thing? Because I mean, it's very unique opportunity to be able to take an idea that you think is going to change, clinical outcomes. You can have one group of clinicians do things one way, another group do another way, and then electronically they can measure those outcomes, and to be able to see which system, intervention is the best. So, I mean, it's protocol-driven medicine to a certain extent, but it leads to opportunities to be able to evaluate for interventions that are going to evaluate clinical practice in a very unique way. So,
yeah, I fully agree. One thing I want to point out to researchers who are not familiar with the patient population at the VA. So they are no different than people coming to Jewish Hospital. They're no different than people coming to U of L. They're old, they're sick. So if you think you can do research at U of L and Jewish, you can certainly do those at the VA.
And many of them are the same. There are many that go back and forth between the two different institutions. So, again, veteran subjects are some of the best. They're the most compliant. Snow doesn't, hold them back. Rain doesn't hold them back. Extreme conditions, they trudge forward and they get in there and they get their research visit done. And, they're a pretty amazing group of people.
Yeah, they're the most appreciative group of patients I ever met, and I have a lot of respect for them. So.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
All right.
All right, Dr.
Well,
Dryden, thank you so much. And
Okay.
Colleen and Sarah will, get your slides. This is recorded, so everyone can watch it. So they will definitely reach out to you for more questions.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate
you.
your listening.